With the release of 2.6 coming in mid-February, according to Adam Fletcher of Blizzard fame, with a PTR due to launch within the next 24 hours as of the release of this video, let's look at the runewords that Blizzard handed out to Twitch streamers recently and whether they're going to be game changers or just more background noise. Starting out, let's cover the more convoluted reveal with the 3-socket Shael Io Runewords that cover 5 of the 6 damage types in the game by having different ending runes for this helmet exclusive group. Now, all 5 of these do provide a fixed set of core boosts with faster hit recovery from Shael, plus vitality from Io, as well as a defense by percent boost and a small percent increase to life boost from the core runeword itself, with each ending rune determining what element it gears the rest of its functionality to. Ground, while made with Shael, Io, and Ort, gives you extra lightning resist and absorb, while Hearth, made with Shael, Io, and Thul, does the same for cold, and Temper, made with Shael, Io, and Ral, does the same for fire, with the percents for resist appearing to vary between 40 and 60%, while the absorbs are somewhere between 10 and 15%. Now, the first one that separates itself a little bit from this formula for me is going to be Cure, which is Shael, Io, and Tal, which provides poison resist, but also poison length reduction since there currently is not a poison absorb function, though I feel this is a missed opportunity since this could have been something fun to introduce for certain characters. The other one that sets itself apart, and probably the one you'll hear most people talking about, is Bulwark, made with Shael, Io, and Soul. It actually gets a much bigger boost than the others of the set, providing not only the base mods, but also 30 replenish life, variable percent lifesteal, Soul's damage reduced by 7, and it also appears to be up to 15% physical damage resistance, which for the cost is a pretty good mid-game choice until you get something more like Harlequin Crest or Vampire's Gaze or a similar damage reduction helmet. All that said, these are just okay helmets, and I can see some niche uses for them, with Ort, Thul, and Ral versions being potentially decent swaps for certain forms of PvP, though with a level requirement of 35 from the Io rune, they just miss some of the low-level dueling numbers, which cuts them off of a lot of potential. Cure similarly has some niche uses, mostly mid-game energy shield builds, though those will quickly substitute it out when plus skills become available, or as soon as they get Plague for an Act 5 mercenary. Personally, this one will probably be my least used of the 5. The most used, however, would probably be Bulwark, since it is a solid helmet for a mid-tier melee character as a stopgap that would honestly last until endgame gear, and it could even be passed down to your Act 2 or Act 5 mercenary for decent effect on them as well until you get them endgame gear as well. And since Io runes are relatively easy to get, it's not in the realm of unobtainium. I could also see this being used in some druid pelts or barbarian helmets for class-specific setups on a solo self-found run, though I don't think we'll see a ton of that. In the end, these mostly sit in an underwhelming territory for me with some specific use cases, but they don't really open up new builds, and only marginally smooth out some that exist if you're doing solo self-found. So basically, fit for purpose, just not overly impressive. Next on the list, we've got the Side Hustle, that uses Shael, Ko, and Eld to make weapons or armor runewords, which should work in any weapon you can have, so it would compete with Harmony for early bows, but it does do a bit less damage. Now, this runeword does what the name implies. It's designed to make you hustle across the battlefield. The armor version basically functions as a pseudo upgrade to something like Stealth or Twitch Throw, and with its runeword cost, I can sort of see that. It's got a dexterity boost, some stamina protection, and a mix of increased attack speed, faster hit recovery, and faster run walk. It's not terrible, and it will have its uses in the mid-game. Though generally speaking, your endgame gear will use better items most of the time, since you can get better perks from pretty much any other armor like Treachery or Enigma, and the faster run walk only goes so far due to how the formula works for on-gear faster run walk versus skill faster run walk. The weapon on the flip side is going to just pretty much be a pre-buffer, and maybe a weapon some people randomly use in the mid-game, but again, mostly a pre-buff. This is because most of the mods on it are, well, lackluster. Mediocre enhanced damage, some boost damage against undead, a little dexterity, and of course attack speed, since a weapon should almost always have that if it wants to be viable. The big perk it brings, though, is a chance to cast level 9 burst of speed on striking, which is a big buff, though obviously temporary, so you'll need to have this on its swap or in your stash for pre-buffing and then swap to your real weapon later. For me, Hustle sits in a weird spot in that I will probably never make them outside of just basic testing, since the armor does not really work except in solo self-found, which I appreciate, but usually just stick with stealth all the way through, unless I really need the resist, and then I would use something other than this. And the weapon will be used for min-maxing by certain players, but generally speaking for broad use, not really that significant except for maybe in some PvP situations, though it does open up a little flexibility for certain odd builds, such as redeeming the Bear Source and the Bear or Wolf Barbarians, provided you remember to proc it, but then you're juggling at least 3 weapons in many cases, which is irritating to say the least. Now as for the next 2, these are at least more interesting to me since they include some new mechanics, with Mosaic being probably what will be most overlooked by a bunch of people because it has to compete with other odd mechanic setups that may work better in some circumstances, and it's pretty hard to do solo at Maul, Gull, and Thul, though it is moderately reasonable to trade for rune-wise because these are not super desirable runes. Its perks are plus to martial skills, increased attack speed, bonus attack rating, cold damage, prevent monster heal, along with an interesting 25% chance for finishing moves not to consume charges. We'll see if that's per hit or per skill use, since if it's per skill use, that could make some of the elemental charges interesting or actually even frustrating for Phoenix Strike, oddly, depending on how you use them. Now, in the reveal that was leaked, there was plus weapon durability and plus attack rating on it, but those are just because of a superior base mod, not from the actual rune word. Where this gets fun is when you combine it with plus skills, so you could get a plus 3 Phoenix Strike Claw and combine it with this for a decent Elemental Surge setup, or a plus 3 Dragon Tail setup for a Kick Sin setup. That said, it is worth noting you cannot get things like plus Tiger Strike on White Claws, only rares due to how item levels work, so you cannot buff that particular skill, sadly. The problem with it taking Mal and Gull is it puts it in competition with other mid-high runewords, even having to go toe-to-toe with Plague, which, while slightly more expensive, is still relatively easy to trade for with the runes, which, sadly, for most use cases, I would prefer Plague over this, or in the case of Dragon Tail or Dragon Talon Assassin, actually preferring non-claw weapons entirely. So personally, I think this one kind of missed the mark a little bit unless they make it so that the plus martial arts functionality is variable, since if it could get up to like 3 or 4 value, it might have more utility. Heck, even just adding some minus enemy defense effects would help it out a lot, just to see it get a little bit more potential, since you still need to get the charges up in the first place to take advantage of the finishing move auto hits when charged. Last up, and probably my favorite of the bunch, we have Metamorphosis, the Kafka-esque runeword. Though, not really, I just wanted to make that reference. But in all seriousness, Metamorphosis is a mixed bag for me. It's a helmet runeword that uses Io, Cham, and Fall. Yes, all the new runewords are indeed 3-socket, but it brings in an interesting bit of potential that the other runewords so far have not. And despite being hard to get solo self-found, these are still relatively easy to get runes online, which is what they generally balance it for, since they're all niche runes. This comes with some basic stats that would be okay by themselves for specific builds, such as plus to shapeshifting skills, a little resist all, as well as the strength, vitality, and cannot be frozen from the runes themselves. Not to mention a bit of enhanced defense that means hardly anything for PvM. The interesting bit is the Mark of the Wolf and the Mark of the Bear features, with these supposedly being able to be active at the same time if the information is correct, though we'll see that when the PTR actually hits. As far as what these are, Mark of the Wolf is an effect that triggers for 3 minutes when you strike while in wolf form, that grants a % buff to attack rating and maximum life. While Mark of the Bear is an effect that triggers the same amount of time when you strike them in bear form, that grants attack speed, crushing blow, and physical resistance. With this, there is some speculation about juggling helmets, beast runewords, wolf howls, etc. while playing and min-maxing. I could see this potentially being used, but there is a point where you're spending more time pre-buffing than actually playing, and it can be a problem. Though there are still definitely questions about how these abilities integrate with different forms. Especially Mark of the Bear, since they could actually beat out some of the other pre-buff options for martial builds. That would proc, say, Mark of the Bear and then return to human form for a 3-minute clear of something like Cows or Chaos Sanctuary. On the Druid, I don't think it will have quite the effect the team was anticipating. I think people will 100% want to use it on some druid forms, but I doubt we'll see too many people taking full advantage of juggling the forms to make use of the marks, with the most likely scenarios being players either ignoring the other mark entirely, or just grabbing it at the beginning of a run and swapping to whatever their build actually is. Sadly, the only way to really change this would be to drastically alter the way the druid shapeshifting tree works, to something more akin to how it works in Diablo 4, which I honestly doubt they're going to do. Overall, with some of these runewords being okay mid-tier, and there are potentially some niche uses in the endgame, though only one with potentially being best in slot, I think the new runewords are fine, but not really super motivating outside of Metamorphosis from a player standpoint. I am still of the camp that thinks we really need a patch or two of kind of focused on class-specific runewords, in stuff like Necroheads, Druid Pelts, and Sorceress Orbs, or even just less popular bases like Daggers and Wands, to get things to really take off for people seeking out and making these new runewords. So what are your thoughts on these new runewords? Mention them down below, and stay tuned for updates as the 2.6 patch notes hint at more things dropping in the very near future as well. You can also find links to each of the reveal videos down below.